The army training ground was alive with the steady rhythm of boots pounding the hard-packed earth, the sharp commands of drill sergeants slicing through the air like crackling static. A faint breeze stirred, the dry dust that lingered over the rows of worn-out tires and climbing walls. The sun hung high, casting a pale, natural light that revealed every bead of sweat on the recruits' brows, the dirt smudged on their fatigues, and the tight set of their jaws. The general stood apart from the throng, his tall frame commanding attention despite the casual smirk playing at the corner of his lips. His uniform was impeccable, every insignia polished to a gleam, but his eyes flicked toward one figure, with something between amusement and intrigue. She moved with a blend of grace and fire, pushing through the obstacle course with a fierce determination that caught even the most hardened soldiers off guard. As she reached the end of the course, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, she paused and wiped the sweat from her brow with a sleeve, eyes never leaving the generals. The crowd of recruits and officers nearby quieted, sensing a rare moment of tension. The faint smell of sweat, leather boots, and gun oil hung thick in the air. The general's voice cut through the murmurs, low but carrying clearly. "Knock me down, I'll give you $1 million. His smirk deepened, challenging, confident, as if daring her to try. She met his gaze steadily, a slight curve of a smile lifting, the corners of her mouth despite the fatigue pressing on her muscles. Her eyes sparkled with unyielding fire, reflecting the clear daylight. "Get your money ready," she said, her tone cool but resolute. A ripple of whispers passed through the soldiers gathered around. Some exchanged looks surprised by her audacity. Others smiled knowingly, recognizing the steel beneath her calm exterior. She shifted her weight slightly, feeling the rough fabric of her uniform against her skin, the gritty texture of the training ground beneath her boots grounding her in the moment. The general's smile faltered for just a fraction, a flicker of respect, or was it challenge, passing through his eyes. Around them, the sounds of the bass seemed to fade, as if time itself held its breath, waiting to see if she would rise to the impossible dare. The sun climbed higher, beating down mercilessly on the cracked earth of the training grounds. The air shimmered with heat, and the scent of sweat, dust, and burnt rubber mingled in the stagnant atmosphere. Around them, the low hum of activity continued, boots scraping, grunts of exertion, the sharp bark of orders from drill sergeants, but she was focused only on the task at hand. Her muscles screamed with fatigue, every movement a battle against the burning ache in her limbs. Her uniform clung to her damp skin, heavy with sweat, and her hair was plastered against her neck. Yet with every drill, every push-up, every sprint, her determination grew fiercer. She was not just fighting the physical strain, but the doubt that flickered in the eyes of those around her, the quiet disbelief that a woman, a newcomer, could even challenge the general's dominance. The general approached, his boots crunching on gravel, his crisp uniform unruffled as if he carried no weight of exhaustion. He stopped just beside her, arms crossed, a sardonic smile tugging at his lips. "You really think you can beat me?" His voice was low but carried an edge that cut through the noise around them. She paused for a moment, the sting of sweat in her eyes barely distracting her. Her chest heaved as she drew in a deep breath, feeling the hot air fill her lungs. She could taste the grit of the training, ground, dirt, and metal, and something indefinably sharp in the atmosphere. Her fingers clenched into tight fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms, her eyes locked onto his, steady and unyielding. "Watch me." The words came out firm, a promise carried on the tension between them. The soldiers nearby fell silent, sensing the weight of this unspoken challenge. Some shifted uneasily. Others leaned in, their eyes wide with anticipation. The space between her and the general seemed to thrum with electricity, the anticipation of a showdown crackling invisibly in the air. She swallowed the burning dryness in her throat and squared her shoulders, the muscles in her neck taut but controlled. Around them, the military base seemed both vast and claustrophobic, a sprawling grid of barracks, training fields, and equipment stands, all bathed in the unforgiving midday sun. The clang of metal from the nearby armory and the faint rumble of trucks starting up echoed faintly, grounding the moment in reality. Her heartbeat pounded loud in her ears as the general's gaze flicked briefly away, betraying a hint of respect or perhaps unease. The silent tension between them thickened, a challenge laid bare beneath the clear, natural light of the afternoon. The early morning mist still clung to the edges of the training ground, softening the outlines of the barracks and the scattered military vehicles parked nearby. The cool air carried the scent of damp earth mixed with the faint, metallic tang of weapons and the faint aroma of pine from distant trees surrounding the base. Soldiers gathered in a wide circle, their breaths visible in the chilly air, eyes fixed on the two figures standing in the center of the makeshift ring, a patch of worn dirt cleared of gravel and debris. The general stood poised, his posture rigid and composed beneath the crisp folds of his uniform, the silver insignia on his shoulders catching the pale light. His face was set in a confident grin, eyes sharp and calculating as they met hers. The morning light illuminated the subtle creases around his eyes and the slight sheen of sweat on his brow, despite the coolness of the dawn. She stood opposite him, muscles coiled and ready beneath her uniform. The chill air brushed against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth that flooded her veins from adrenaline. Her boots pressed firmly into the earth, toes digging slightly into the loose dirt. Her breath came steady and deliberate, mist curling as she exhaled. Around her, the scent of sweat mingled with the crisp freshness of morning. The faint rustle of fabric as she shifted her stance. The murmurs of the crowd hushed as the general's voice rang out, casual yet charged. "This will be over quickly." His grin widened, the challenge clear. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, centering herself. Every nerve was alert, every sense heightened. Her fingers curled slightly into fists, knuckles whitening with tension. Her gaze remained locked on his, unwavering. "Don't be so sure," she replied quietly, her voice steady but carrying the weight of unspoken resolve. The gathered soldiers leaned in, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The faint clatter of gear and the distant calls of sentries faded into the background as time seemed to compress around the two combatants. The first movement came sudden and swift, a blur of muscle and intent that would set the stage for a battle neither would forget. The duel had stretched on, each movement a calculated test of strength and will. The dirt beneath them scuffed and churned from their relentless footwork. The sun now stood higher in the sky, casting natural, clear light that revealed every drop of sweat gleaming on their skin, every bead catching and reflecting the reality of their exhaustion. Around them, the gathered soldiers watched in tense silence, breaths held, eyes wide with disbelief and respect. She stood, chest heaving, her uniform stained with dirt and sweat, muscles trembling from the fierce exertion. The cool breeze whispered through the open space, brushing against her flushed skin and tugging lightly at loose strands of hair plastered to her forehead. The sharp, earthy scent of the training ground, damp, soil mingled with faint traces of gun oil and leather, filled her senses, grounding her in the moment. The general, bruised and marked by the struggle, still carried that faint smirk, a mixture of admiration and acceptance in his eyes. He extended a hand toward her, the movement deliberate and respectful. His grip was firm, solid, acknowledging not just her victory, but the strength and spirit she had shown. "I underestimated you," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. She met his gaze steadily, accepting the handshake with a firm grip, a triumphant smile curling her lips despite the heavy ache in her limbs. "Now about that million." Her tone was teasing but confident, the challenge still alive in her eyes. Around them, the soldiers broke into spontaneous cheers and applause, the sound ringing clear and true in the open air. The camaraderie and respect that filled the space felt real and earned. In this moment, beneath the natural sunlight and the watchful eyes of the base, two warriors shared a silent understanding. One forged through battle, resilience and undeniable honor.